Greetings from Hong Kong. My name is Anatoly Alexienko, and I'm privileged to host these seminars with very well-known established scholars in the field of higher education from around the world. So today is my great pleasure to welcome warmly my colleague from Italy, Dr. Giulio Marini. He is an established scholar. He worked at University College London for several years, and then he moved to Italy. He's now a senior assistant professor. He also leads or co-leads as associate editor one of the major journals in the field of higher education, particularly studies in higher education. He has published widely on many topics, interesting discussions, provocative themes. So today he will speak about the issues of postdocs, institutional policies, maybe in postdocs. We will hear from him. Please keep your mics on mute for now, but feel free to use the chat for questions or comments. And when Giulio finishes his presentation, I will invite you to ask questions in person or through the chat room. So, Giulio, without further ado, let's hear your presentation. I'm really curious
Right.
about your most current findings in that field.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, Daja Hao, it's great to be in Hong Kong virtually. And now I'm sharing my PowerPoint presentation. And so I will tell you what this presentation is about. Okay, so do institutional policies protect postdocs? So in this particular case, I'm talking about gender equality plans, which is a topic which is known at least in Europe, but I guess also worldwide. In the UK, it is widely known for things such as Athena's One initiatives, which are run institutionally, sometimes at department level or school level, not just institution-wide. That's a tradition also in Italy and other countries. So why do I talk about this? Well, I've been a postdoc myself for several years before becoming tenure. Well, formally speaking, I'm in a tenure track, but it's almost done basically. So I don't want to talk too much about the Italian system, but I recently joined back my country with this kind of contract, which is basically more secure than an open-ended one in England as things are right now. So I owe something to postdocs, I feel, because I've been one of them for a few years in Italy, Portugal, and that's it. In England, I was something like research associate, which is, I mean, not really postdoc, but almost. Okay. So, and also apologies for having postponed this presentation, but because of perhaps viruses got from nursery, from my son, I was really sick a couple of weeks ago. So great to be here now, and thank you for having rescheduled. So the rationale for the study is the following. As I told you, there are several initiatives worldwide for making a working place a better one. So we are talking about laboratories, universities, research institutes, and Athena's one is perhaps one of the most famous, at least in the Anglo-Saxon countries. And it is mostly gender, not necessarily just gender, but it is mostly gender equality. But racism, physical safety, and dignity are other topics that are covered from the data I drew from, and I will speak about that shortly. There is quite a solid evidence that science is not toxic free. Now, I'm quite ironic here because when I was a teenager, I thought, okay, people doing science, they must be, brains. Therefore, they must be good people. Now, we know this is not the case. We are humans like the others. When it comes to talk about the way we behave, perhaps we are not that much better than people working in other sectors. For sure, there's a lot of research about that. And we know that there's a lot of gender inequality, even sexual harassments, and other forms of evil around the world. Now, postdocs are the bottom of academic hierarchy if we exclude PhD students, who are students, but usually they contribute to laboratories. So presumably they are more likely to suffer discriminations because they are weak. There are a lot of them. We know the labor market. Many people want to be at least postdoc in order to continue to do research once a PhD is done. And basically, some PIs may take advantage of this kind of situation. It does not happen always, but we know there is a pattern. Now, my research question is, having observed both discriminations personally suffered or witnessed in a specific place and having information about whether a place is gender friendly or having a gender equality plan, I want to seek whether these sort of gender equality plans lessen the likelihood of gender discriminations. Now, there is a bracket over here in order to let you understand the literature in case you're not so familiar. There is a stream of research about these gender equality plans, but believe me, there's not that much about the actual outcomes out of these plans, which is a little tricky. But most of the research I know is about what the plan is about, not what the changes this plan has caused. Okay. So, data method. I realized that 1 year ago, more or less, it was the end of 2023, and I was in Hong Kong. During the visit, I was in Hong Kong with there, and I realized there was this survey with publicly available data set about working conditions of postdocs worldwide. Okay, not just in Europe, not just in China, not just in the US, everywhere. And this survey was just about the working conditions. Okay, so it was accounting for disciplinary field, country of residence, nationality, whether a person has any kind of identity belonging to any kind of minority, workload, wages, promotions, managerial styles. We'll talk about that more in detail later, and a few other things. I mean, it is, quite comprehensive questionnaire, therefore also data set, and the data might be downloaded for free. They are in an Excel format. Okay, there are several observed forms of misconducts, such as, for instance, gender, so against women, basically, sexual harassment, which is slightly different as a kind of evil, discriminations against the community of LGBTQ+, racism, which is a great traditional form of discrimination, but also a few others that are relatively new, such as ageism, which is something in Italy is mostly unknown because there is a reverse age problem. If you are senior, you are a boss, basically. So we don't really understand that much ageism here, but does exist for sure. Neurodiversity, disability, bullies, discrimination by religion, and political opinion. You may note over here that there is not discrimination against people coming from abroad, which is something I was pretty curious about. So I think it is a tiny limitation of this data set also for open answers, the typical kind of qualitative part of a data set was mentioning quite often problems about differences across cultures because, you have a lot of Chinese people, Indian people, Asian people, virtually speaking, working in the US, for instance. And there are problems. We know that from literature, probably also from personal experiences. There are also some open text descriptions, and I will show you just one over something like dozens and dozens of pages once I copy-pasted all of them over a Word file. I chose this one, which is not typical because it is not about China, it is not about US. It is about the kind of place I work in right now, which is southern Italy. So let's read this. An example about the Italians, the good people. I don't know whether you know about this kind of quotation, but it dates back at least end of World War II, when the Italians, also non-Italians, would like to describe ourselves like those who were wrong about fascism, but we were not that bad like the Nazis. Something like that. Is that true? In some regards, it is, but we definitely like this, and I don't think we are always right about that. Okay, so there is this person who says it was my previous postdoc in southern Italy, which still maintains a patriarchal system in numerous fields, including science. They are also extremely xenophobic, which is quite interesting. Also, I was made fun of in public due to the fact that I'm an Eastern European woman, and I can guess things about that, such as are you a scientist or should you do something such as, I don't know, a janitor, for instance. Mm. So once I was asked by a security guard to leave the lab in the afternoon because, as he specified, a woman should cook dinner for her husband, not work in the lab. Now, believe me, I don't struggle to believe this happening for real. Okay. Also for knowing some of the, especially, older admin people I have seen around. Usually they're nice, but it is not, I mean, it is not really strange to hear something like that. And, sometimes the Italian people believe to be nice and funny and to have a good sense of humor. In this case, it happens that the person who heard that didn't agree about that kind of sense of humor. But let's talk about the main part of the presentation, which is data, quantitative data, okay? I'm not going to discuss in detail every single variable here. I'm just giving you a sense of what's about. So we have 54% of respondents who believe that their working place is friendly and or having specific policies for gender equality, which is a good percentage. And 17% report cases on themselves or observed against others. And basically, there is some association, meaning that if the place has some gender equality plan, there is a lower probability to have these cases of gender discrimination. But in following analysis, I go more in depth about that. So there's some logistic regression. Yes, I heard something. Okay. What does predict gender discrimination?
I think, Juliet, was some kind of intervention, unexpected from somewhere. But your mic is on mute now, Julia. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know what happened, but okay, I'm back. Back to business. Okay, so what does predict gender discrimination? Now, gender equality plans are associated with lower probability to have cases of gender discrimination, which is good news. But there are also other variables predicting gender discrimination, being white, for instance. Now, personally, I don't believe in white and black. I believe in ethnicity, but it is commonly used as a variable. So I use as it is understood in global standards. But also having sought help in relation to mental health, which is quite interesting. So if you seek mental health support, you're more likely to have also suffered gender discrimination. We don't know what is causing what from this kind of data, but it's quite interesting. And at the same time, being healthy. So sounds like the typical victim is white, healthy, and the person who has sought help. There are also other forms of discrimination, as I told you, but let's go deeper in analysis because so long it is quite superficial. So following figures in the next 3 slides show whether specific conditions are altered if there is or not a gender equality plan in a postdoctoral working place. So for instance, we want to see for foreigners, do gender equality plans help in having fewer cases of gender discriminations? Now, in these graphs, we might appreciate the following. Postdocs aim at remaining in current employment. So gender equality plans work fairly almost for any target, but not if postdocs aim at remaining in current employment, which is viable intention to stay, which might be interpreted as, if you really have great stamina, it doesn't really pay off. And perpetrators are higher in hierarchy, which is omitted here, but you can see at the bottom that it works fairly well if the perpetrator is a graduate student, which is likely to be somebody at the same kind of academic rank or even lower. Okay, so the other way around point is if the person delivering some comments that are not fair, if those perpetrators are, your PI or another senior member, a gender equality plan doesn't really work for reducing the likelihood for this to happen, which is bad news. Let's look at something more detailed about managerial styles. So there is a likelihood of having gender discrimination. Likelihood of having gender discrimination is reduced by gender equality plans, especially if there is no culture of long hours, which is figure 2C, the third one. Okay, this maybe you don't see my mouse, but it is the third with letter C for culture. Okay. Again, here we have a problem of causation because we don't know whether a gender equality plan reduced a culture of long hours or basically, if you have a culture of long hours, the gender equality plan is not effective at all. And here you might have different interpretations, okay? Gender equality plans loses effectiveness as far as postdocs find themselves in the position to pursue extensive overtime, which is similar to the previous point, and it is the fourth chart, okay? Even in this case, the problem of interpretation is similar. There's no way with this data set to understand any causation. It's really hard. So it's a matter of making some interpretation and guessing also what these gender equality plans might be in details, which is not observed, which is a problem. I didn't say that, but in doing these logistic regressions, I computed robust standard errors accounting for disciplinary field and country of residence. So where the postdoc is, not which is the nationality of the postdoc, which is the country postdoc does work in. Okay. Third point here, gender equality plans appear effective when PIs and managers are poor in awareness of support services, which is viable serve _2, and when postdocs complain about managerial styles, which is satisfaction about a managerial style set _men viable, which is the first one. Okay, so that's quite interesting because if a PI is not knowledgeable about gender issues, which is quite possible if you work hard under high pressure in a biology lab, you are a man in your 50s, you just don't care about gender, perhaps. These kind of people do exist, okay? So if they don't care, if they don't know, but there is a gender equality plan, perhaps you can point to that kind of piece of report or piece of regulations in order to ameliorate your conditions, which is good. Final point over here, gender equality plans are able to shield from persistent poor institutional performances related to mental health and other forms of support, but not from frantic way of working, as I was pointing in the first points in this slide, which is quite interesting as well. The final analytical slide here is about intersectionality, which is a classic point about, for instance, gender times race, okay? But other kind of combinations may apply. So here we see that both sexual harassments and discriminations against the community belonging to LGBTQ+, so both these phenomena are not effectively covered or mitigated by gender equality plans only, okay? Because you might have other problems or they're basically distinct, okay? They're different phenomena. Instead, racist plans along with gender equality plans are good, effective, which is good news. Okay. So limitations and relevance of this brief short study I have right now under peer review. Sample is a convenience one, which is not good, but that's what we have. The number of respondents is in the range of 3,000 and counting people. So it is pretty good in terms of absolute numbers. But I mean, in principle, you would like to have a different sampling strategy with perhaps fewer observations, but something more consistent. But that's what we have. It is hard to pose strict causations, as I said, perhaps multiple times today, which is something I regret. But working around interpretation is quite interesting, accounting for some recent literature about what gender equality plans actually may achieve or have achieved in the last, say, 10 or 20 years. And another big limitation is that we don't know what the gender equality plan actually is. So I may try to figure out what the gender equality plan might be in an English university or in the UK, because I was part of UCL. Actually, it was not UCL, it was IOE, or Faculty of Education and Society at UCL Gender Equality Plan, being part for 1.5 years or something. And often in my previous research in the UK, I happened to interview perhaps, for instance, head of departments who believed a lot about this Athena's One initiative, and they spoke to me about the importance of, for instance, make you a very simple example, the importance of not scheduling any meeting beyond 4 p.m. because you might be a parent and you might go to pick up your child somewhere outside the university. And I underline parent, not just the mother. The father might be in charge of doing that, which was one of the main point I was making when I was in England. I mean, I am a parent, not just the father, the daddy, who is, the one who works, and the mother has to find, I don't know what kind of miracles in order to survive with this extra burden. And a lot of stories in England also told to me from, for instance, reps, I mean, unionists in universities, because of the gap in salaries or other kind of things. Or for instance, a man getting a higher salary, other things being equal, because the band says, I have a family. So you need to pay more me because I need, money for the children. I mean, why this shouldn't apply to a woman? Instead, you are discriminated if you're a woman because you have children, which means that you're going to exit from the laboratory at 3 p.m. instead of 6 p.m. And this does happen, incredibly. But there's something good about this piece of paper, or at least I will defend my point, my corner here, once I will receive at least major revisions, if I'm not rejected. And my main point is that there is a novel contribution from this data and a novel perspective about gender equality plans. For instance, its own effectiveness for the whole workers, not just those participating in the group carrying on any kind of gender equality plan. Might appear like strange, but if you look at literature, that's what we have. So there's something strong about here, because we can see that basically a summary of findings is the following. Basically, gender equality plans are more likely to ingrain change for the better in some specific circumstances, such as for those having care responsibilities, which is basically children, as it is observed in the survey. But in a country like Italy, sometimes you don't make children because you know it's going to be a problem if you're a woman. But nevertheless, you're going to have the care responsibility of your own parents if you're a woman. Because if you're a man, you don't do that. So, sorry for my smile, but it's, ironic. Sometimes we don't make children in this country, which is a problem, a big problem. But at the same time, we don't get rid of this kind of gender discriminations at work in the universities, but also in other places. And if I have time before reading the rest, just yesterday I was speaking to a colleague of mine who is a woman, and we were discussing this. And basically, a very liberal, highly educated husband doesn't see all the way the extra burden of a woman. And I was buying every single word my colleague was telling me about responsibilities, about family. And then I was telling my story. I commute, so I feel guilty having two children because I commute. So in some cases, I just cannot help. I'm not in the city, right? But okay. Back to the summary of findings from this paper. Another example that of mitigating the likelihood of uh, um, of discrimination in cases postdocs are not expected to work beyond the normal amount of time, which is really challenging if you think about the way laboratories are led in many parts of the world. Competition is sky high, right? In China, in the US, perhaps a little less in Europe, but still it is quite a problem. And if you're a PI, you are biology and physics, you are in your 40s. You see some women in early 30s. For you, they are just, human resources paid not even that much, relatively, not even that much, and they must produce. They must produce findings for the papers. Okay, the same job we do, actually. So we know that. We know this pretty well. And these, of course, may produce toxicity and other forms of evil. Much less likely, we should expect gender equality plans to change managers' habits. This is tough, but we need to acknowledge this. There are some few cases this does work, as I told in the previous slide, but mostly doesn't because I have tested multiple ways. My data analysis is by far much more, many more combinations than those I just exposed to you right now. However, when these actual behaviors are present, there is a notable difference between having or not a gender equality plan in one's place, a clear sign of positive intended outcome. So I end my presentation and my paper with an optimistic note, which is quite unusual for me. I have a tendency to be more on the pessimistic spectrum, but accounting for literature, which is sometimes pessimistic about the gender equality plans or any kind of initiative, I believe that this kind of data analysis is showing that overall it is worth having those initiatives, which are extremely expensive in terms of time. Okay, I remember, for instance, when I was in the Athena's War at UCL, I had some workload for that. So I could have asked it to teach a little less, to participate to some meetings, endless meetings, ending to perhaps nothing. Okay, so they're not for free, these plans. So we need to be sure they are effective, I believe, because there is a cost. It is a hidden cost, but still a cost. So basically, that's my presentation. I don't know how long I've been in terms of timing, but of course, as Anatoly said, questions are most welcome. And I mean, I'm supposed to give the answers, but so questions rather than answers are most welcome from my side. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Julia. That's great presentation. I'll be waiting for some questions. So please feel free to raise your hand or write a question into the chat. I just briefly reflect on what you just said. I'm often shocked myself by this aggression and anger which has emerged in the neoliberal higher education over the past few decades. I observe cases where this anger comes from established scholars with high reputation, and I'm a bit afraid that this leads us all into the wrong direction with regard to education of new generations of scholars, because postdocs are pretty much at that level when they learn to really become new faculty members. So if
Yeah,
they absorb these types of horrifying
yeah.
patterns into their behavior, the question might be growing or looming larger in the coming decades, then what is next in terms of new scholars' behaviors, their relations with students, and how it affects the new generations of learners in general. So we shouldn't really kind of close our eyes to these particular problems and have to probably bring them to kind of light and more attention in the coming days. I just kind of read the literature on workplace harassment at the moment. So it looks like it's not in the center of our discourse in higher education, but at the same time, the kind of that particular peripheral discussion which happens about harassment in higher education is quite kind of disconcerting. So I feel like we need to do a bit more work there. So I will before I see colleagues raising their hands, let me just probably ask you a question which would be on the one hand related to probably our next research in the field. So if you do a survey of a similar kind or new survey, what would be your like where would you make improvements? Which particular other questions which are not there in the survey, or how would you say that when we work on these types of survey regarding this particular uh, questions involved in improving the policies or our relations in academia regarding the postdocs, but in general, I guess vulnerable faculty members in academia. So what should we ask? What should we do? What kind of research is needed there?
Well, thank you for the comment and the question. As I said, perhaps I'm biased because of my own personal interests, but I don't think I'm totally biased. I mean, we should ask whether people are discriminated against their own nationality if they work abroad. It is no secret that in the US, for instance, Asians are not treated fairly, and it is against their own interest to, treat the youngest generation, uh, people who are already highly productive. They're not just, PhD students who are, in many cases, already producing a lot. They are highly productive and they're not treated very well. It doesn't make any sense. So, if I could have some budget to make some kind of research with a survey, perhaps even, some kind of qualitative interviews, which are always nice, I would ask about the extent to which, for instance, people would move away from a country which is not theirs because of some poor conditions. And sometimes it is not just the salary, it is also, of course, how it is tough to get a tenure, if there's any, but also for this kind of general atmosphere, which is increasingly bad in many countries, in the US, but also in Europe, I guess. So that's a problem. That's a big problem. I mean, if you think about the point of view of the US, if I may try to embody the US kind of interest, uh, they should try to retain those Asians working over there. And it looks that sometimes because of the short-term interest in pushing publications, etc., they're doing exactly the rest for the long-term kind of consequences. On top of them being not just particularly morally great. Okay, so if we put aside the moral side and we think about just the neutral kind of interest, I'm not sure we are always doing well, also in Europe. So I would add something about that. There is also, I mean, one of the biggest problems we have is to balance achievements about gender equality, but also protections for other minorities. about, sexual habits, for instance, or anything, and the current problem of the rejection of this, such as, I mean, you're paid to work, and we don't believe in quotas, if we use English. So why should I have a person who is which has a neurodiversity issue? You are here to work. You're not here just to give a salary to someone who is a poor devil. Now, I don't believe in this, but we need to face this in current days because this is sky high. I mean, the public opinion in many countries is really buying this point, and we cannot stay aside in a citadel, in our ivory tower, because they are entering our ivory towers. They are already inside, literally inside in some of the best universities in the US. So we need to protect ourselves. And it means to protect also our postdocs, I believe.
Okay, the kind of the bridge to what I thought, colleagues, feel free to raise your hands and ask questions through chat. So in terms of policies in institutions, based on your personal experience, observations, now you're a teacher, a professor in Italian university, but you know also the global higher education landscape quite well. So in terms of policies, which specific policies would you recommend as being essential?
Yeah. Yes, as I said, I mean, I'm in contact with multiple people belonging to some group at institutional levels in Italy, and I have heard a lot about England, Northern Ireland, and Scotland, not that much about Wales. And I would say that those arenas are political arenas in many regards. And the challenge is to propose and produce a natural implementation, changing something, not everything, but just something for real. So the best example I'm giving you is what I said earlier. I mean, there was this head of department, very decent person, telling me how much things changed when she worked with others with the introduction of normal meetings outside 10 a.m., 4 p.m., sort of. So I would say that any policy is welcome, and there shouldn't be isomorphism in my opinion. We shouldn't copy what the others do. We should just in each place uh, look at the problems we do have and putting something in the regulations for everybody, not just for those who are activists, and then imposing few changes. And I believe few minor changes can send also a sad message, which is now you don't play the game in a different way, in a traditional way. You don't do that because there are regulations. So there is, senior managerial team behind that because they signed something. There's their signature over there. So the times of, traditional gender inequality because you should go to cook for your husband are over, period. So, and you don't even have to say that it's not funny. I would say the best policies are those that are really simply to be implemented, very, very tiny things sometimes, not anything which is, a revolution or a very ideological standpoint, just something concrete, as hard as concrete is, the material, something tough, but maybe small, but tough and real and something you can touch. And then you enter a path of change, which takes time, but at least it is a cultural change because we need a change in culture.
Hmm. Yeah, it's kind of culture is really essential here, just to really kind of, especially I guess organizational culture as such, where people spend most of the time. It's a workplace, right? So, and organizational culture is really important, but at the same time, from my observations, it it's not easy to introduce some policies which are quite specific on the one hand, but also comprehended well, just so that it can be implemented, right? Because we live in this multicultural type of environments in academia, and interpretations of these policies can be quite diverse and sometimes contradictory, as I would argue, right? So sometimes it's not really easy to implement the policies which we expect should be protecting us or should be kind of safeguarding the organizational culture as such. A lot of this depends on individual people, and some of these people have some issues, or I don't know what can be kind of and what this causation of the problems may kind of really be in terms of, because when I read some of the literature, it says some regulators are trying to impose clauses which relate to domestic violence, for example. Right. So some of the problems may emerge outside of the campus, and the person who comes to work brings the problems from their household into the workplace, and that has this kind of spill
Yeah.
over in some way. So and yeah, I like I like it begins like it kind of creates this kind of very complicated type of discourse, which sometimes may not really be easy to regulate, let us say, inside of the campus.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, having read many of those open answers, I have to say that it is so clear that it is a byproduct of competition and, high standards to be respected, a lot of pressure. Many people just work hard. Some others uh, use the argument of competition to justify some kind of behavior. Maybe they believe in their head that it is a shortcut or it is, a necessary evil in some cases. Of course, reality is always a collection of blurred kind of combination of things, and each person is different. But having said that, it is so clear that it is a byproduct of neoliberal universities. It is so clear. And yeah, I would say it is short-term interest versus the mid long term. And the short term interest, I mean, publishing a lot, for instance, so you need to work hard by night. And if you don't, perhaps it is because you're just a woman, right? I mean, I have read so many versions of what I just said in these open answers, and they're mostly about the main countries, the most powerful countries in science. I mean, the US, China, for instance. So this great competition, and I mean, I'm a person believing in competition. It's great to try to deliver the best we can and try to be better than others. There's nothing wrong about that. But we should consider the way we do that. Is it fair or unfair? And what is fair, what is unfair is subjective. So some regulations would be really good in order to understand which is the threshold you shouldn't overcome. For instance, you don't impose people to work on Sundays unless there is, unless you work on Fridays because you're Muslim. So maybe you don't work on Fridays because you're Muslim, and maybe you work on Saturdays. I mean, if there's something about that, that would be great. But there must be some kind of limits to the competition we suffer, because at a certain point we suffer physically this kind of pressures, because I mean it is crazy to try to publish in journals. As I said, Anatoly, I work also as a associate editor in studies. I reject papers every single day. I'm not happy to do that. It's something I have to do, and I strongly respect people when I push reject. But if I need to reject, doesn't mean I have legitimation to treat people unfairly. And this should happen also in laboratories when there is a PI and 10 or whatever the number postdocs. And that kind of leadership, strictly speaking, leadership, not leadership in the sense that you have a role, leader in the sense that uh, 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 that you're able to give a sense for doing something, that you make a group, a nice group, etc. That kind of leadership is something some people are totally unprepared Some people are great in doing research. They obtain grants because they're great, which is good, but then they're not good leaders. This is a tragedy because one thing is to do one's job. Another thing is now I impose others to do the job the way I believe should be done, which is perhaps good for you, but not for others. So this is a tragedy in higher education. It is about neoliberalism. I mean, I have seen a lot of great researchers becoming head of something, head of research, head of department. Doesn't really happen for head of departments in the UK, but perhaps head of something, head of research, and they're really bad in leadership. Really, really bad. So yeah, I mean, managerialism, that's what it is. It's wrong, basically. So we have already published a lot about that. So I don't know what we could do to change things for the better. But as I said, perhaps just few regulations that work.
Thank you. I see Guzman just appeared on our screen. He's an old colleague. So, Guzman, do you
Thank
have
you,
any?
Professor.
Yeah,
Thank you. Nice to
Hi.
see you.
yeah,
Yeah,
just
I'm thankful to you,
questions or
Professor, for
comments.
inviting us in different occasions and different meetings. Also to Professor Marini for his very good explanation. I would just like to give a small example of Kosovo, because as I know, I'm teaching at University of Pristina, Kosovo, and usually Albania, Kosovo, and this Western Balkan countries are facing migration. And before almost 20 years, the government of Kosovo introduced a brain gain scheme for PhD scholars, for master scholars, but at some stage also for postdoc scholars in order to attract them, because when they went abroad at different universities, especially in US and UK, EU, they tried to stay in these universities, and the government introduced the brain gain scheme in order to attract them. And if you are coming back working for your university or government, you will be paid additionally from your salary for 1 year. Although sometimes these guys, these people, these professors, they face problems with their colleagues, but it is regulated with a government decision in order to attract these people, because they assume that they will bring some value added from Western universities, from worldwide universities. And still, this scheme is working. I mean, it's in power, trying to mobilize the best people and working on European integration process, but also reforming the country, and also supporting Bologna process at universities. Thank you. I don't have something else, but just I wanted to give an example of our case.
Yeah, it's migration. I guess it's about migration in terms of we want talented people, right? And we invite people from other cultures and or maybe reintegrate people who left their homeland and then came back. But at
Yeah.
the same time, just so what kind of trends do you see there in terms of migration and
Well, that's really something I really like as a topic. So, Gazman, thank you for being here. I remember you, and it's great you are connected from Kosovo, I guess. And so, yes, returnees, that's the term. There's a lot of research about returnees going back to mainland China, and sometimes there are cultural shocks because perhaps you did a PhD in some American university, some research intensive American university, you go back to China. Although research is great now in China, people work in a different way. So you understand very well the language. I mean, you speak perhaps Chinese very well, but you don't really understand why they work that way. So I would like to quote Kobe Bryant, who unfortunately passed away. He was same age I was, and he was playing basketball in around the place I used to play basketball in Florence when he was in Pistoia, which is, but we never met. And he said, when I was back to the US, it was a kind of cultural shock. It was like a block of ice put in a glass of water. I couldn't mix with them. So I was understanding every single word, but I was not understanding what they were meaning. And this is one of the problems of brain gain or brain back policies. And as a returnee myself, I see that pretty well because sometimes I believe in something which is more global higher education, and some other colleagues, they believe in domestic higher education, and I don't understand why they believe in domestic higher education. And same story for my wife. And so we do have some fiscal advantages for having for having accepted to come back, which is nice. But there are also these problems. And yeah, so I believe it is really important because it could be even a form of discrimination. I mean, you have been abroad for several years. You don't really, I mean, you're one of us, but you're not really one of us all the way. Therefore, I mean, we treat you well, but you don't really belong to the place. There's some research about, and I think we should do some more research about that because each country would like to have those brains back for many reasons. But do they deserve those guys back? It is not just a matter of money. I mean, are you including them? Do you really want to change something? Perhaps importing something which does work about England, about America, whatever. Knowing my own people, for instance, since the beginning, I said, okay, I'm back. I didn't like Brexit, these kind of things. Okay. There are many things that I really appreciate about the Italian higher education system, for instance, freedom, etc. Okay. But I also believe there's something I can bring you because you know, the peer review system, for instance, does work much, much better relative to Italian journals. But do they really want to change for the better? At least what I think is better. Not always, you know. So this kind of cultural differences within the same nationality are really interesting, really interesting.
Thank you. I think we're approaching the end of this presentation. What just mentioned about these types of tensions within even the same culture or cross cultures. I think in the process we probably all have to really kind of admit that more tolerance, more patience, more listening, kind of attention, care needed in general, really, just to help these people who are strangers, who are new, who are vulnerable, really just kind of to become part of the community, and that requires a lot of support. And policies, institutional policies are important, but it's more than policies. It's more, I mean, these individual behaviors are really so important. As you said, leadership, right? Leadership.
Yeah, I think it is leadership because, you know, of course, we're not paid to get a mug of tea or coffee and talk about how things are going at home or these kind of things. I mean, we are paid to deliver something. But the point is, how can we deliver something if we are always in a hurry and we don't care about ourselves, about each other, etc.? It doesn't work because the job we do is, okay, doing some experiments and publishing in a great journal, a great piece of research about, I don't know what, subatomic atoms, I don't know what, right? But let's put things in this way. Can we achieve that output without being decent to each other? I don't think so. But many others would say just by means of being not so gentle, by means a little aggressive, I can achieve things. Many people believe this. And this is a tragedy because we know it is not really working, at least in the long term. In the short term, okay. I mean, I kick you, I push you, and maybe you do something because there is a retaliatory kind of behavior. Because otherwise you're going to get promotion, you don't get the following year as a postdoc, so you don't get, you know, the new contract. Okay. But if it is just, you know, that kind of language, I mean, it's a short-term kind of game, and the best games are the long-term ones. So, yeah, unfortunately, we are in this kind of neoliberal world, and we are, you know, squashed by pressure for short-term results. So you need to publish every single year. You need to publish multiple papers, and it must be great papers, etc. which is okay. Of course, we need to be productive. We shouldn't just, drink a glass of Chianti wine and watching the landscape over there and saying that we are intellectuals. Of course, we need to work. But the point is, which is the best way to work? Which is the best kind of combination of things to make us more productive? In that kind of argument, I believe we fail in many ways. And these plans are good in order to tell those guys believing that being nasty is not perhaps nice, but it is the way to go. We need to tell them you are wrong. We need to replace you. Either you change or we need to replace your leadership with somebody else. It is as simple as that, I think.
I think it's a great point. I just, you know, I want to believe that what we have talked today is still kind of periphery, or the, and the academias have many people with positive attitude or care and so on. Let's at least educate for that purpose, or let's try to do what we can do in our places, really to shape that type of healthier and more respectful environment, atmosphere, right? So, and that's really something we should really kind of try to do more. And I hear more of this reference to solidarity. I guess this solidarity across borders, across countries, becomes something really essential in the whole process of how we build this kind of new resistance to the neoliberal aggression and so on. So, yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Giulio.